At this time, I would like to introduce our special guests and ask them to come to the table. Looks like with Vice Chancellor Skinner. Both of these individuals I've had the pleasure of working with over a number of years. Mike Kirst is the president of the State Board of Education. I worked with him when I was up here, and also each year I take my class at the University of San Diego up to Stanford, and he is a guest lecturer in our class. Sue Burr is the new executive director of the State Board of Education. Spent a lot of time with Sue when she was the director of the County Superintendents Association, and I was in the Secretary's office. So it was always terrific to work with, and I'm really, really pleased that she's been appointed to the State Board. As this board knows, we had a joint meeting with the State Board last year, which we thought was very, very successful and productive. Unfortunately, we're not able to arrange that this year, but I'm very pleased that Mike and Sue were able to address us today, and we can talk about some opportunities that we may have to work together in the future. So, Eric, did you want to?
I would only briefly add to that introduction that at our April Student Success Task Force meeting, Dr. Kirst attended that meeting and previewed some of the opportunities I think that are ahead of us in terms of the community college system working with the K-12 system in order to advance student success. And some of those areas have to do with developing new definitions of college readiness, kind of building off the new Common Core standards that have been adopted, and then also building out assessment programs based off of those definitions. And the Student Success Task Force was enthused about the potential that really exists at this point in time, and so it's wonderful for the whole board to be engaged in that conversation as well. So again, welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you both for being here. Do you want to start out?
Yes,
Mike?
I'll make some opening remarks, and then I know we have a brief time, so I won't be long. I did leave for you this is my PowerPoint that I presented to the Student Success Task Force. I cut all the problems and went to some of the solutions, and I'll just read the headings here and make very brief remarks. This is about the Common Core, which we at the State Board adopted, and now we have signed up with the Smarter Balanced Assessment Group, which has about $178 million to assist in new assessments. And so we are also playing a governing role in that group. And so we're able to shape things somewhat in terms of the types of assessments that will come down. And we have special needs here, and I think the relationships with the post-secondary sector are certainly at our list, and we want to talk about how to get that done today, and hopefully emerge with some clear ideas as to how to work together. Just reading my headings, I'm not going to spend all of my time on the bullets, but I think these are interesting to you as to what Common Core could do. It could improve the readiness of incoming community college students. One thing I found in my own research, which have focused heavily on this area in the past, is that community college students don't get signals in K-12 about what they need to know and be able to do to be successful. A typical interview I did about 5 years ago was if they passed their minimum high school exit test, CASHE set at 8th grade mathematics, and they completed their course requirements for graduation from a high school. And California is high school course requirements for graduation are some of the lowest in the country. If you completed those, their view was they're all ready for community college and ready to go. And so they did not have a clear signal. Common Core would build into their schooling signals all along the line about college readiness, so we would have a clearer signaling device. Second, It could provide opportunities for earlier intervention and remediation. If we can agree on some cut points on our assessments, for example, in the future, that would indicate readiness for community college, that would be helpful. We could expand our K-16 partnerships and work together, pathways around Common Core. And of course, it sets up a way for our faculty to meet in a way that I think involves discussions that are a lot closer to college standards and college orientation. Obviously, the Common Core assessments and the Common Core curriculum could be useful for course placement. It is really a shame that the current system we have called STAR really was never designed well to link to colleges, I think, and is given at expense to many hundreds of thousands of students, providing very little payoff on course placement advice and on data and abilities to improve our preparation. It could also, obviously, the Common Core could improve instruction and student services. Your entering students that come into the community college will have a portfolio of assessment data on readiness in specific competency areas. That's quite different than what they now have. It should be, the data that we have produced from this effort should be useful in designing basic skills modules and improving instruction across the curriculum. Common Core can also strengthen career and CTE readiness. Here is where it's a longer conversation, where there are college and career readiness standards. However, the Common Core is pegged to relatively high-level jobs. I'm familiar with the 5-level ONET system the Department of Labor uses, and they are level 3 and above. So they are not many, the Common Core CTE, career readiness definition, is actually above a lot of your certificate courses. I was recently at the auto collision course at Delta College and saw the shops and so on. That would be a level, that occupation is below what the Common Core career readiness definition is. They set it quite high, and that's something we may have to discuss in the future. It also concerns the State Board of Education. It'll be important to get the details right. And there I mentioned about some of the issues on career readiness that I just covered here. Not clear in the last bullet on that one if Common Core movement embraces a multiple pathway approach. And that's an issue that we will be discussing with our Smarter Balanced Assessment group in our other areas. And finally, Common Core, for the first time ever, it's a common market for standards, for assessments, for frameworks, for teacher teaching modules, and so on. We don't have to develop all this ourselves in a fiscal arena where we're quite well heavily pressed. So we're casting about to look at what other things are on the market. Test publishers like Pearson, they're not going to be asleep at the switch. They're developing actually for 2 states not in the Common Core, 2 of the very large ones, Texas and Virginia. They're developing a full battery of everything for them. So we can look at a very robust, I think, system going forward in terms of what the national market will deliver to us. So with that, I'll end on Common Core. I think that I'm sure this meeting will be better than the last meeting I had with this board. Just to tell you, I met once. I was the president of the State Board from 1977 through 1981. We met once with a community college board of governors. We had a very rancorous argument about how to split up the voc ed funds and never met again. Yeah. So I talk about the lack of dialogue between K-12 and higher ed, and I always tell that story that there I was in the seat to do something about it and wasn't aware enough of even how to go about it. And so I've learned a few things, and I know you all have, and I think that how to move forward is an important issue here. The CSU and UC rely strictly more on the A to G, so I think the payoff from Common Core might be heaviest in the community colleges if it is done right.
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks, Mike. Maybe I'll just give you a little bit more specific information about how we're moving forward with the implementation of the Common Core standards. I think, as Mike mentioned, they were adopted last August, which was the first step of many steps that will have to take place in order for them to roll through not only the K-12 system, but the interface between K-12 and higher education. We have an agenda item on our state board meeting coming up this Thursday that's quite an extensive item that talks about what activities have occurred to date. There's a multi-level planning team that is working with the Council of Chief State School Officers, which was one of the organizing entities, along with the National Governors Association, of which I am a member. One of our board members, Patricia Rucker, is a member as well, and then many Department of Education staff, legislative staff, Commission on Teacher Credentialing staff. We expect to have a plan, an implementation plan, put together with the assistance of CCSSO in August, and that will come before the State Board of Education in September for adoption. So I would keep your eyes open for that. And just to give a little specificity around the Common Core assessments, those are required under the terms of the federal grant to be administered in 2014-15. So that will be upon us more quickly than we think. And as Mike mentioned, we are now a governing state in one of the consortia, the Smarter Balanced Consortia. So we're well underway with the planning with the Smarter Balanced Consortia as well. I will just say that while I think the idea of a national consortia, testing consortia, is a great one, I think their goals are very ambitious. And so the possibility that they're actually going to be able to implement in 2014-15, to me, remains optimistic. But the good news is that our own testing system, the STAR testing system that Mike alluded to, is up for reauthorization prior to that. So I think we'll have an opportunity to make some significant changes, hopefully that will be in line with what we'll implement ultimately through Smarter Balance. So I think there are real opportunities there, especially as Mike mentioned, around some early signals that would be helpful, especially to community college students, about preparation and the kinds of things they need to do to be ready to enter community colleges exist there. Also, just to be clear, the Common Core standards are in English language arts and mathematics. Although with English language arts, they have infused science and social studies to a certain extent in the English language arts standards. The other thing I always say to folks is they started with California standards, right? We are always regarded as being high, so they started with California and Massachusetts. So the Common Core is an improvement on our system, but not a major change. So I think that we will be able to incorporate these changes relatively seamlessly within our own system. Just with respect to suggestions about how we might interact more effectively, I had the privilege of speaking to the Intersegmental Coordinating Committee about a month ago to talk about Common Core, and they all reminded me that the last time we adopted standards, especially the academic senates for all of the segments, were very helpful in helping align those standards. So I'd really like to take them up on their offer because I think we really will need that assistance, and we need to be a lot more purposeful about how we are aligning with the higher education segments, because to date we've kind of been looking toward the K-12 system for all the work, but we know that we have to get to the place where we're aligning not only the standards but the assessments. And I'll stop and be happy
Yeah,
to
I'd
answer any questions.
add one quick footnote on the standards are, are not, they are much needed improvement and updating of our standards, and our frameworks will reflect that. And there are some changes. But what is, I think, hopefully will be significantly different are our assessments. Our assessments are all closed-in, moldable choice, minimal writing. This is a technology of a decade or more ago. It is not well, to me, calibrated for success in college, and therefore they will. I think they will change. And I would add the governor is also unhappy with the current assessment system, and really was enthusiastic about some major surgery as well on that. So that will, I think, hopefully be quite different from what we have today.
Okay. Thank you. Chancellor Scott would like to make some comments, but just for clarity, could you could you just take a second and explain smarter balance? I don't know that all of us are up to
Well,
speed
so
on that.
there were two, the federal government made available, as Mike mentioned, around $200 million for assessment consortia to come together to develop the Common Core assessments. Only two emerged. Smarter Balanced is the name of one of them that happens to be, the governing state is Washington. There's about 15 or 16 states in that. They have an active participation from West Ed, and most of you are probably familiar with West Ed, and most of the western states are part of the Smarter Balanced Consortia. Smarter Balanced is based on adaptive testing. Some of you may be familiar with that. That's what they use for the graduate record exam.
And from placement exams, you remember?
Which, as Mike said, is a much more current technology. We think a much more effective technology, particularly for the diversity of learners that we have in California. The other consortium is known as PARC, and I can't tell you what that acronym stands for, but it's actually, the governing state is Massachusetts.
Okay.
And they will also use, both of these will be computer-based assessment systems, so they're right now doing a big needs assessment to make sure that we have the technology available for students. PARC is more based on something that they call through-course assessments, so they'll be kind of doing a dipstick at points in time, and then they will yield a summative assessment. So they're fairly similar, except that the difference with Smarter Balanced is while they will provide benchmark or formative assessments throughout a student's career, those will not be scored as part of the summative assessment. That's the major difference, as I understand it.
Great. Thank you. Chancellor Scott.
Well, of course, we're very pleased to have both Mike Kirst and Sue Burr here with us. And I, like my friend here to the left of me, Scott Himmelstein, have had contact with both of you and have a great appreciation for the importance that each of you offer to the whole field of education, both K through 12 and higher education. Maybe to be helpful to this board, I want to make sure that they and I understand Common Core will be a means of assessing students when they're in K through 12 and will be very helpful in terms of assessing whether or not they're college ready. Is that right?
Well, yes, that's true, but Common Core affects every policy, major policy area that the State Board has in curriculum and instruction. It is a set of standards. Those are rather general. That has to be reduced, for example, to a curriculum framework, which would guide instruction for 10th grade English language arts. It would also affect our instructional materials, which would need to be aligned to the Common Core curricular framework and the standards. It would affect our professional development, and it would affect, hopefully, our initial teacher training. I'm sure it will. So assessment is, basically in the middle of that sandwich, if you will. The standards, the framework, assessment, the cut points, how good is good enough, the professional development, the pre-service development, all of those, so that the Common Core is infused through everything, and it is, should be alive in the classroom as a basis for teaching, and the assessment is on the back end.
Okay, and that assessment will occur at what junctures in K through 12?
Well, as currently written, in accordance with the federal law, we would give the test annually in grades 3 through 8, and once in high school, probably in grade 11. That's what they're designing for. That's the federal law. Now, our state testing law, as you know, is grades 2 through 12. So in the absence of any change in our state testing law, we would be giving it annually every year, beginning in grade 2.
Mm-hmm. And how would you compare Common Core? My idea is that it's an improvement, but to the early assessment program that was pioneered by California State University and now is voluntarily used by quite a number of our community colleges.
Yeah, that's a technical determination which I don't think I can comment on with any certainty. I certainly can't, and that's a question of test alignment and all that. I'll offer an opinion, having been involved in both of these. That I think these assessments will be quite different, and it'll I think cause a reconsideration of the current way of EAP. I don't know that the quote level of the test will be changed in terms of its demands on students, but I think the format and style of the assessment will probably be different. The EAP, I mean, if you read the Smarter Balanced proposal from which they receive federal funds, so they must implement, the flavor, tone, general approach has significant differences with EAP, as I read it. That's not a, official testing alignment expert answer. Yeah.
Well, will the Common Core, though, do, and maybe do more effectively, but at least do what EAP does, and that is EAP, number one, indicates to a student whether or not they are ready for college work. It tells them, by the way, you're not ready for math, but you are ready for English, and CSU has used it, which I've encouraged community colleges to do, and I would encourage them with the Common Core, is once that you've passed that, they don't have to then take that assessment when they arrive at the community college door. If they have, if indeed at the junior year I test and my math score is high enough, I don't have to then be assessed as to whether or not I'm ready for college. It says that I'm ready for college, and if it says that I'm not ready for college, it means that one can spend either his or her senior year getting ready for college. In other words, this, by the way, you're deficient in English, so maybe you better take some intensive work in your senior year in high school so that when you get to either the community college campus or the CSU campus, you can pass that assessment.
Yeah, the Common Core will, unlike our current curriculum and assessments, have college readiness embedded within it. That's the big switch. When we did our standards movement in the United States in K-12 over 10 years ago, post-secondary education was barely involved in that. That astounded international. I would go abroad and they would say to me, "You did your K-12 standards without having higher education in the middle of it?" Yes. And so the effort was to start from the beginning with college readiness as the focus. Therefore, when it was designed, that I think the spirit of the EAP, if you will, is built into the base. Now, as to when that test, what our 11th grade assessment would look like and whether that would carry out the purposes of the current EAP, that would be a decision for the post-secondary system also to use, and I would hope we could negotiate that the way the EAP was negotiated between the segments.
How will the higher education here in the state of California have an input into Common Core?
Do you want to answer that?
That was actually one of my suggestions, was that we work through the ICC, if that makes sense to folks. I think that's what happened when we did our standards back in the late 1990s, that we tapped especially the academic senates of the three segments to help us link those two together. But we're certainly open to other suggestions.
Well,
yeah,
one
that's a joint decision, as I see it.
Would be maybe
work out together.
A working group of the State Board of Education and community colleges that we could maybe form a working group right away and talk on this, because this is in our Student Success Task Force. One of the first things that obviously we recognized in order to improve success in community colleges was to align the K through 12 and community colleges more closely together, so that K through 12 could be teaching in such a way that they would in turn, when those students step onto our campus, more of those students would be college ready. A lot of the criticism that the public makes is, why are colleges spending so much money on remedial education when in reality they should have gotten that in K through 12? So if there's some way in which this embedding of Common Core, and you've made it very clear that it's more than assessment, that it will affect the curriculum, that it will affect the professional development of K through 12 teachers and so forth. If we can accomplish that, it will be a tremendous boon to students and will save the state of California a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we simply say, sometimes people say to me, hey, we're wasting a lot of taxpayers' money because, you know, you're having all those basic skill remedial education courses. And I kind of say, well, you know, they come to us that way, and we can't just blind our eyes to the fact that they are unprepared for college English or college math.
Can I interject, Chancellor Scott? In our implementation of the early assessment program, we're working very actively with CSU and with the State Department of Education and with the State Board now to I mean, we're very enthusiastic about the potential for the new assessment of the Common Core to actually enhance and improve what we're doing currently through EAP. In implementation of EAP, the most common criticism is that students are getting feedback too late to effectively remediate in time to reach college level when they graduate. So this is an opportunity to look at students earlier in their K-12 career, and I think can have a tremendous effect on the numbers of students who are graduating college ready. And I also wanted to mention that I was contacted last week by the State Department of Education, letting me know that we would be asked to provide a representative on the technical committee for the Smarter Balanced consortiums.
Yeah, but to discuss your idea of a working group, I mean, we're not in great shape in California in terms of the structural ways to work together on this. I mean, we have 3 different post-secondary systems with 3 different boards. The K-12 board and system has not had, you know, a long history of very smooth, very tightly coupled relationships. We don't have a coordinating commission anymore, and so the machinery of this is really, when you look at it, is really a problem. I've worked a lot in Georgia, for example, and the Georgia regents, they cover everything from the University of Georgia through the community colleges in one system. They have, you know, much closer relationships with K-12 and so on. So we're at one of the more fragmented ends of the state spectrum in terms of getting this job done that we need to get done.
But you know, I heard something that I want to ask. You said that the assessments in Common Core would be 2 through 8, and then you said it wouldn't occur again until 11. Is that right?
Under federal law, so this is under the No Child Left Behind law, the states are required to assess in grades 3 through 8 annually, so every grade 3 through 8, and once in high school, grade 11. But our state law, we go beyond that. We predated NCLB number 1, but we also believe we need, as a state, more assessments. So we test annually in K through 12.
Okay, so this will improve, I gather, you believe that this will be an improvement of the testing that's done, and therefore the signal may occur before.
Well before.
Oh, good. Before the 11th
Well before,
grade.
yes. That, you know, and that there should be a sort of many fewer surprises by students that they don't do well on, say, a community college placement exam, whatever that is, because they should have been getting signals through a college-ready Common Core where they were standing on college readiness. That should be embedded in the K through 12 assessment system. If it's not, we're really not implementing the spirit of what this is all about, and which we agreed to implement.
And I will tell you that right now we are trying to remedy what I think is an unfortunate thing in community colleges, that we do not have common assessment at every college the same. I don't know all the history behind it, but it's kind of nonsensical to think that we have 112 colleges and we could have 112 different assessment instruments. requiring that individuals who go from one college to the other has to take another assessment test. So, anyway.
Yeah, and we have several board members, but just to follow up on the Chancellor Mike, you're saying, and I agree, having lived it, that our machinery isn't very, very good. But is that to suggest that you and the other segments should move forward to help build that machinery, or that's not, that's not a very ripe area right now? Because I heard from our Vice Chancellor that she's been invited to something that's good, but that's probably not sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are opportunities. The Intersegmental Coordinating Council seems to be one. The California Education Roundtable seems to be another, which is the overseeing body of ICC. That's the best shot we have, I think, right now. The governor, as you know, is interested in streamlining government, but I don't think there's any move to say, gee, let's merge all the higher education boards together. But
Member Ramos and Member McDougall.
Thank you, and thank you for being here with us. I would say that, three of us on this board recently went through our confirmation process, or reconfirmation process in one case. And we certainly heard from Leader Steinberg in the Senate that there is a strong expectation that we would certainly, under current circumstances, be working more integrally with one another in a more coordinated fashion, and even offered his office to facilitate that if there was any reason to sweeten the deal in bringing us together along those lines. I also heard myself, I can't speak for the other members who went through the process, from the gubernatorial staff who handle education issues, that they see that as something that would be a sensible imperative as well. So I'm really pleased that we're beginning here to not only deepen the dialogue, but to target particular areas of opportunity for us to expand that dialogue. But I think we would all agree that to the extent that we can do that in a more global and broad way, as opposed to just incidentally through certain vehicles or on certain issues, that we would want to try and do that. Now, I don't pretend to have the solution for what is the forum for that to happen, but I think the bigger we can think in terms of opportunities to think in a more analytical and integrated way, a more strategic way about how we interface effectively, the better. I also wanted to say for the record that I'm very pleased to know that we're moving towards this Common Core and towards standards. I think this is something that we all have a responsibility to do, but one of the concerns that I and many others have, as you know, is that it's not just about asking students to rise to a certain level of readiness and performance. It's also about providing the supports, particularly to disadvantaged students and others that don't come to even the kindergarten point of entry ready to learn. So there's, as we know, several portals or several levels of readiness that we have to talk about at different stages of the cycle. And this is probably not the opportunity or the space for us to figure that out, but I think as part of the integrated dialogue we're talking about having, it can't only be, I think, about the idea of kind of looking at the question of how folks are performing on exams or how they're doing in these incremental steps of assessment. It has to also be looking back at the ways that we help them succeed from one stage to the next through supports that do involve resourcing and do involve the need for more coordinated efforts, to go back to what I started with. So I say that just for the record.
okay.
Thank you. Member McDougall, then Vice President Perez.
I, too, would like to extend my thanks for your presence and great respect for the important work you're doing, and I do hope that it results in a level of collaboration and coordination that truly does make the difference that we have every reason to hope for at this point. I have a question or a clarification on what I think is the most important of the slides that you presented, and that is the one that talks about improving community college instruction and student services. And the question is the time to production of where we might reasonably expect to have a portfolio of assessment data on readiness and specific competency areas, and then, because that's really the nub of what we're talking about here, that we are going to receive from you. This will represent the product of all that is being discussed in terms of our collaboration. So my question is, what is the time to production? And second, the means of transmission, I would hope, would be electronic transmission for each student that would be available. So I think my question is...
Well, so the first year of administration for the National Consortia Test is 2014-15. So spring of 2015 would be the first time it's administered on a statewide basis. So the production of actual records, et cetera, would occur subsequently to that. And as far as I know, there haven't been specific conversations about how those transmissions would occur and what that would look like. But 2015 is the earliest that we could expect it.
So fall of 2015 is...
Spring of 2015 would be when the assessment's given. So students who are entering in the fall, yes, would have the results.
Okay. And I would strongly encourage that be available via electronic transmission, because if it is not, it's going to be tremendously cumbersome and ineffective.
Yeah, and we presumably we will get assessment results back much quicker for students. Right now, they get them back in mid-August, and if that doesn't change, the governor will be unhappy anyway. He's really upset about that.
Vice President Perez.
I just want to also thank you for coming today. I really appreciate the opportunity to have some dialogue with you, and I think it's really important that we continue to have dialogue on ways that we can collaborate together. You had mentioned, and I'm not sure if this was what you were referring to, a national assessment, and I recently was given some information from the National Assessment Governing Board about an assessment that they're looking to do. It doesn't focus so much on readiness, it focuses more on preparedness, and preparedness for college academically, but also for job training programs. And what they're doing is they're comparing data nationally, statewide, as well as locally to help, the community colleges and the colleges understand where students are, and are very hopeful that that could be an assessment used throughout. That's a common assessment, opposed to having so many different assessments. I was just interested to understand how you're currently collaborating, if at all, with them.
Yeah, let me, I'll speak to that. We were at the same presentation together. We've mentioned three assessment instruments today: the Common Core assessments, which are developing, the Early Assessment Program, and then the National Assessment of Educational Progress. These, it seems to me, have to be aligned over time. We can't have a national assessment which is different from the Common Core and an early assessment program which is different from those two. So I think there will be some merging, and the national assessment will have to look at their frameworks for testing. Now, the interesting thing about the national assessment, which goes back to my comments on career tech education, is that the national assessment is talking about career clusters and showing whether students on the national assessment are ready to enter training for those career clusters. They go much deeper in terms of jobs that are at a level, in some cases, below where the Common Core is. For example, they had heating and air conditioning they gave us. Okay, that's an ONET 2 job. Common Core says we're just at a higher, is geared to a higher level. You could do various types of welding programs that would be where they would do a Common Core, a national assessment. This is a cut score for that. The welding programs, most of them, except at an extremely high level, are not in the current Common Core college readiness. They start above. They have a very high floor. And this is an issue that our two institutions, particularly community college and K-12, really have to confront. This is less than an issue for the higher education sectors, four-year colleges, which are relying strictly on A to G. And so this is, to me, an unresolved issue that we will have to figure out some way, and that's why I highlighted in here.
The other distinction I would make between NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and what the two national consortia are doing and what we do in our state testing, NAEP is kind of a dipstick test, if you will. It's samples. It's pulling samples from various school districts, and then it gives you sort of a report card of what's happening in the system. Whereas the assessments that we're talking about are actually individual students, to your point about, you know, we can give a score to Mike and he can report to you how he did. Every single student is tested, and it's used both to help guide instruction within the K-12 system, but also to make decisions at the post-secondary level as well. So little different purpose of the two, but I completely agree with Mike. At some point, they really do need to be aligned.
Member Izumi?
Well, thank you. I want to welcome Mike Kirst, who I've known for many years and have admired for many years, and also Sue Burr as well. I don't think the governor could have chosen two better people for the extremely important positions that you now occupy, and I'm sure all of us on the board are very glad to have this opportunity to talk with you. And also, too, I want to just mention, Mike, that I serve on the Joint Committee on Career Technical Education, so those differences of opinion on voc ed have not changed in 30 years.
No, I have not.
So, anyway, but what I wanted to do was actually follow up on something that the Chancellor had brought up about the EAP. And, you know, the Common Core assessments won't be ready to 2014-15, optimistic if, you know, as Sue mentioned. But so until that time, we're going to have to deal with the tests that we do have. And as the Chancellor mentioned, that the purpose of EAP was to have those students in the 11th grade know where they stand and hopefully do something about it in their senior year. Do we have a sense of whether those students who are not doing well on the EAP, who are not testing college ready, are actually taking advantage of that information and you know, bringing themselves up? And also, you know, are they when they do go to college, are they, you know, being able to, you know, either test into you know, the regular courses, or are they still having to take remedial or basic skills courses?
Yeah, I think you need to ask Cal State U their detailed assessments. My one remark would be that for a lot of that the EAP was designed for the four-year sector taking A to G. And you can't take the Algebra 2 exam until you've taken Algebra 2, and that's, you know, half their exam. So it always, the reason I'm more enthusiastic about Common Core is it's difficult to retrofit, in my terms, the A to G EAP focus it has into a community college population, which may not be taking all those courses. So that, to me, over time, the Common Core, I think, should provide earlier signals and also get students more aware of things before the senior year. So I think that's the way I would handle it. But as to what is actually the depth of penetration, as a CSU is studying that, I've not seen any real, they have not published anything I'm aware of, I think I would be, you probably would be too, that says here is our penetration and our impact in terms of exactly what it is. Maybe they report it to their trustees, I don't know.
Other board member comments or questions? Okay. With that, thank you too very much for...
Yeah, let me just close by saying we need to really ramp up our collaboration. I agree with the Chancellor. Typically, you have not commented on our board items, for example. Well, if we're unveiling a plan to implement the Common Core in September, seems to me that is a concern of yours. And, you know, so how do we interact in this way? So this needs to happen pretty soon, or else we're going to repeat the path of the mistakes of the past.
Right. Well, in my closing, I was going to suggest that we have opportunity as well to come to your board, and I'll work with the Chancellor and staff how we best do that. I agree. We've got to ramp it up, and we've got to ramp it up quickly. But thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.